Hey everybody, Rick, Healing Field Farm here. I thought I would talk about some differences between a THOW, or a tiny house on a trailer, versus a shed conversion, which is what we did. So we had talked about doing a tiny house and even a schoolie at one point, but we ultimately decided that living space, because we do have a large family, and I know a lot of people do make it work, but for comfort reason, we went with a shed conversion. So, and a couple, I'm just going to point out a couple differences between the two that maybe a lot of people don't think about when designing. So, first off is cost. You can stick frame a tiny house on a trailer for about the cost of what we did here with a shed conversion. It would probably be cheaper for the framing aspect of it because it is a smaller space. If you're on a trailer, you can only do like 8 to 8.5 feet wide, something like that, and you can only do, I think, 13.8 high. 13 feet 8 inches high is a max, I believe. Where our house is about 13, we are 14 by 36. So, I mean, you would save in space, in lumber costs, because it would be a much narrower building. Not necessarily as short. You can get the trailers, all the way up to like 40 feet. But at the same time, it depends how much you want to haul behind a truck. So if you do a tiny house on a trailer, you obviously need a trailer. So, and that's really your first purchase when it comes to a tiny house. Uh, so you're looking at anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000, if not maybe even a little more, unless maybe you come across an old camper trailer that you can make work, or old used trailer or something. But the older trailers, they're going to have issues down the road. And if it's something you're going to haul all the time, I would say you're probably better off getting a brand new trailer with no rust, no cracks, no wear and tear on them. Okay. But that initial investment, $7,000 to $10,000, that's your foundation on your house. Now, our shed conversion, our foundation was just a pad of gravel and crushed stone, compacted, and then blocks. So our foundation came to about $2,500 total. It was $2,000 for the pad itself, and then another $500 in blocks, which seems like a lot, and it is for blocks, but it's steady. It's not coming off. Granted, unless we have a huge earthquake, which is highly unlikely up here in Maine. So those two differences alone will offset that, will change the cost between $2,500 for a foundation. And granted, we could have done that cheaper had we done it ourselves, but we were not living in the area, and we needed to get it done while we were working in another area. So that's why we hired it out. So $7,000 to $10,000 versus $2,000 is a huge cost. But at the same time, if you're stick building, you're doing a narrower building, you're going to save money on that aspect. We have smaller appliances in our house, probably about the same size you would have in a tiny house on a trailer. You may go smaller. We have like a 6.5 cubic fridge in here. You guys, may want just like a five cubic foot. It depends how you design it and set it up for space wise. So with our house, we have trusses, so we can't have a loft. Whereas in a lot of the tiny houses, you can squeeze in a loft up there and have storage, or maybe even a little bedroom. Now that being said, you have little kids, that may be great. We're going to put a loft up there. Little kids grow, and when they hit teenage years, they grow tall. So that loft may not be ideal at that point. So if that's your plan, keep that in mind. Not everybody looks to the future as much when they're designing their homes and houses. So another big difference is obviously where stationary. We have a home base, and this is where we make our home. versus you guys on a trailer can tow it anywhere you want to go. But towing can be very expensive. You have to have the right size truck in order to tow, depending on the size. They can be very tippy while transporting, because they can be top heavy. So, and a lot of people don't think of that when they're designing. You may hire it out, have somebody tow it and move it for you, but maybe you want to travel and go all over the place, and that's fine too. But you also keep in mind, a lot of campgrounds are not open to the idea of tiny houses. A lot of town zoning are not open to the idea of tiny houses. And I think a tiny house on a trailer is a great idea. I think it's low cost. It's something somebody could build and pay off within a couple of years if done right. And a lot of professional builders have jumped on this wagon, and they're charging $40,000, $60,000, $80,000. And if that's the price you're going to pay, you might as well just go buy a regular house, because it's almost the same in cost, and depending where you live. You can do it much cheaper yourself. Overall, this 14 by 36 cost us, it'll be $22,000 total cost when it's said and done, between the house and finishing it off. That's not counting the foundation. So tiny house, say you bought a $10,000 trailer, you're already at $10,000, and you haven't built your the frame of the house yet. You haven't connected it to the trailer. That's a little pricier. You're going to spend some money in there between steel and lags and bolts and everything to make sure that that's really secure. Whereas we're just on blocks, and all we had to do was insulate underneath. So another thing to think about is, now we have a water tank in the house. We bring in our own water. We'll get the well going in the spring. But if you're in a tiny house on trailer, you need to have a water tank, and you need to have a black water tank or gray water tank to store that. And then at some point, you also need to pump that out, unless you're using a composting toilet, and you can have a gray water tank and just dump that anywhere that's accessible. But you also have to take into consideration the weight of your house and stuff like that. The tanks, when the water tanks get full, that adds a lot of weight. So you may build your trailer and it says 13,000 pound rate, and well, you built everything, and your house weighs 12,000 pounds, and you only have 1,000 pounds to deal with, and you still need to bring your fridge in, your stove in, your countertops, and so keep that in mind. Whereas we're on the block foundation, we don't really have a weight capacity per se. We don't want to overdo it. There's certain things that I didn't want to bring in the house, just because it is on blocks, and I don't want some areas of the house settling more than others, and end up warping down the road and have uneven floors and stuff like that. So there's something else to consider. The overall size, I spoke a little bit about it. You're talking 8.5 feet. You're building your walls, you add in wood or sheetrock, so you're even a little bit less inside now. And depending on the size of your family, if it's 1 or 2 people, that's great. You guys aren't going to trip over each other, and there's still plenty of room. But at the same time, if you have a big family, that fills that space pretty quick. And once you get your counters in there, your appliances, your bedroom or bathroom framed in, your space shrinks, so you don't have as much of a livable space. So that's something to keep in mind. You're dreaming about building this tiny house on a trailer, and you're going to be debt free, but you're spending all this money, and you're not really sure that you can live in that space. And that's why we went with the wider, the 14 foot. We've had 6 or 7 people in here at a time. It's still roomy and comfy. It still took a little getting used to. We had a much more open house where we were living before we took this journey. So, but in a tiny house on a trailer, you'd be about half the size of what we're in, honestly. So just something else to consider. Getting insurance is another thing. Can get insurance on our house. It's not really an issue, but a lot of companies don't like to insure tiny houses per se, so that can be a struggle. And you don't want to put all your money in something and not be able to get insurance. And I am by no means trying to talk you out of going one way or the other. I'm just trying to give you some facts and let you know that there's pros and cons to each side. So but ultimately, we love our shed conversion. It has been a fantastic time building it, and we're still, we're finishing up. We're doing floors and trim, and we're going to redo the ceiling and do some more, trim work up there. But overall, that's really all that's left to do. So it's just a little bit slower going when you're living in it. The other thing with a tiny house versus the shed conversion is, we ordered ours, they built it inside a big giant building. They build 3 or 4 at a time, and they whip these things out pretty quickly. So if you're building your own tiny house on a trailer, you don't necessarily have a giant place where you can back that in and build out from under cover of the elements, and you're fighting with tarps all the time because it's going to rain or it's going to snow or you're going to get ice. So that's something else to consider. You don't want all your building materials getting wet and sealing it up and having mold and moisture issues and all that. So take that into consideration too. Tarps work. Maybe there's big storage places near you that's big enough where you can build something. Maybe you can rent it for a couple months and while you're doing the main structure until it's all wrapped up and everything. So just some points that I wanted to point out. I hope this has been helpful and informative. If you have any questions for us about our house, our shed conversion, please feel free to leave those in the comments and we'll be happy to answer them. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a good day and talk soon.